Adam Neiblum graduated from the University of California, Santa Cruz with a degree in philosophy and religious thought. He eventually had an epiphany after reading noted secular authors such as Hitchens, Dawkins, Harris, and Pinker. Since then, he has been an obsessive student of secular studies and an avid reader in atheism, humanism, and the evolutionary sciences. Adam has authored several such works, including Unexceptional, Darwinism, Atheism, and Human Nature. He's also written Common Sense Recovery, An Atheist's Guide to Alcoholics Anonymous, as well as several articles in Free Inquiry magazine. His most recent work, tentatively titled Rise of the Nuns, and today's talk is about just one of the chapters in that book, Rise of the Nuns, The Importance of Science and Freedom from Religion, which is soon to be released by Hypatia Press. And without any further ado, I present Adam Neiblum.
Thank you. Let's see, what do I do now?
Hit the share screen.
Okay, here we go. Working with the technology, figuring it out.
Now click on
No, I know.
portion.
I remember this thing
There you
here.
go.
There.
And then share. And then go up, open your PowerPoint. And then click on presenter. There you go.
We should be good.
Yep.
Now, how do I make everybody go
are
away?
you guys just seeing the screen?
Yes, it's correct.
We can see Adam's screen with the logo,
Okay,
our logo on
I gotta
it.
get rid of
Thank you.
these.
The opening slide.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Not super tech savvy. My wife is helping me out. I'd like to thank Fred for inviting me, Fred Levine, and to share some of my work with you here at the Capital District Humanist Society. Let's see if we do it like that. Today's presentation is based on an essay featured in the 2022 November edition of Free Inquiry magazine. That's how I got here, with the title Manufactured Need, Capitalism, What Capitalism Learned from Christianity. That essay is an amended version of a chapter from the book that I'm writing. The chapter is called Manufactured Need and Human Autonomy. It's a little different. Again, the book is Rise of the Nuns, The Importance of Science and Freedom from Religion, soon to be released by Hypatia Press, which is a division of Occam Publishing Group. All right, let's do this. Nope, I got it.
Do it again. Click back. There you go.
Sorry about that, folks. There. Nope. Okay, once I figure out the technology, capitalism practices the manufacture of need. I learned this, and it learned this and a great deal more from Christianity, as I argue. When capitalism was becoming a thing, a distinct economic system, an ideology, and more, Christianity was the dominant successful paradigm at the time in terms of mass marketing, public relations, indoctrination, hierarchic construct, management, political influence, sales, brand loyalty. And in a sense, Christianity served as the model for all modern big business. Manufactured need is the first thing that I noted. First example of a surprisingly lengthy list of shared characteristics. Capitalism famously practices the manufacture of need. What is that? Sometimes it means the creation of a false need, like cigarettes are a perfect example, not in any real sense an actual need or even a want. It's an acquired taste at best. But the habit can be readily acquired, especially in a social context in which smoking is encouraged or promoted as something which makes us look cool or is associated with looking grown up or mature. The company that makes Camel cigarettes was famously outed for aiming their advertising specifically at the younger demographic, but they all do that to some extent. The start 'em early approach follows a template familiar to all of we critics of religion. Get them early and they're yours for life. Religious training, or in other words, indoctrination, also emphasizes this approach. Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss famously refer to religious indoctrination of children as a form of child abuse, much to the dismay of Christians and Muslims around the world. Not all manufactured need starts from scratch. Sometimes it's about taking a pre-existing want or need, a genuine need, and manipulating it. Consider the transportation, for example. We all have a need at some point in life to get from point A to point B. Capitalism famously exploits that genuine need and warps it into something far more profitable. How? Famously, sex sells, associating success with the ladies. With the car that you drive is a time-tested formula, but establishing a connection between your car and your social status or your class are similarly potent techniques. Capitalism and manufactured need have made the automobile vastly more than a mere means of transport to your average American. So capitalism emphasizes coercion, often coercion through fear. So with cars, you've got like concerns about sexual lure or social status, but there's also fears about physical safety, right? Buy a Volvo. Insurance is an entire industry based upon this, on fear. Whole host of other concerns. If nothing else, there's always that time tried and true, act now, supplies are limited. But the best example for this would be guns. Americans today buy a whole lot of guns, and encouraging fear of crime, fear of immigrants, fear of terrorism is a great way to sell more guns. The New York Times recently informed us that gun production in the US has tripled since the turn of the century and 9/11. And this appeal to and emphasis upon fear, on fear-based sales, is another feature common to both capitalism and Christianity. So one final example of the morally problematic coercion we know of as manufactured need, American women are coerced into the belief that they must put on their face every day. Americans spend billions of dollars every year on a startling and even an obscene array of cosmetic products, fashion, elective surgeries, and a whole host of other products and services. What is that? Which feed off of the fears and insecurities of American women and girls. Modern America's capitalist culture famously cultivates problematic beauty standards for girls and women, encouraging negative self-images, and again, starting them very young. Hand in hand with manufactured need, planned obsolescence. It's profitable for things to break, need repair, need to be replaced. The upsell technique is something that is familiar to all of us. Would you like fries with that? Yeah, the wide range of extra purchases are always encouraged. We're convinced that our car must never be more than 1 or 2 years old. Computers and iPhones and household gadgets aplenty all famously need apps and accoutrements galore, with all of which change regularly and are new and improved on a regular basis. Utilizing a combination of marketing, propaganda, sales, and indoctrination, capitalism invents that hard-to-reach itch and then sells you the perfect back scratcher. Ideally, that back scratcher breaks down shortly after purchase or is followed by a sales pitch, which convinces you to buy the accompanying foot scratcher, the knee scratcher, the right-hand scratcher for your left, or the left-hand scratcher for your right. Perhaps the new and improved high-tech smart scratcher. I don't know. I think that one tells you where you're going to itch before you itch, or the gold and diamond encrusted Cartier for the more discerning customer. Bottom line, manufactured need and planned obsolescence are definitive characteristics of contemporary American capitalism, and, as I will argue, characteristics shared with and rooted in the Christian religion. Before I make the case for that, introduce a useful distinction noted by such thinkers as 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant, whose forehead is pictured here. And that is the distinction between intrinsic value and instrumental value. Intrinsic value refers to something which is valuable in and of itself, whereas instrumental value refers to something which is valuable as a means to an end. So, for example, we would ordinarily think of a car or a rifle as things which are instrumentally valuable, meaning that they are valuable as a means to an end. Money, too, should be considered as instrumentally valuable in this way. On the other hand, a person like you or I, an example of something which has intrinsic worth. A human being is an example of something which is valuable as an end in itself, Kant would say, and never merely as a means to an end. Capitalism thrives upon and even encourages a reversal of human value at core. sales and profit come to be seen as intrinsic goods, things which are good in and of themselves, whereas persons are reduced to the status of mere instrumental goods. So in other words, we're good merely as a means for making a buck, whereas making a buck is what it's all about. Sounds familiar? To summarize thus far, capitalism practices both the manufacture of need, planned obsolescence. As an economic system and as an ideology, it is morally problematic in several regards. It coerces consumers through fear, starting with the young and exceptionally vulnerable. It normalizes coercion, makes it into a social norm, and it turns our ordinary moral understanding on its head. What did I do? Tech, come back.
Click over there.
Here?
Click- There you
Oh, that
go.
worked, that worked, that worked.
And now you can go back to the arrows.
No, I see. Okay. Sorry about that. So, as I will argue, Christianity also represents an early model of this reversal of values at core. So that's done. That's done. Okay. To understand the relationship between capitalism and Christianity, it's helpful to understand how Christianity conceives of our fundamental nature, as so much arises from this basic foundation. This area is an early illustration, like the 1500s, I think, of the great chain of being. It's the premier origin myth of Euro-American culture, which has for thousands of years grounded our basic understanding of what human being is, of the cosmos, and how we fit into the whole thing. This is a picture of everything and how it all works. The great chain of being is a product of Christian scripture and Christian thought. God sits at the top in the supernatural realm. Human beings are in the middle. You can see there we're partially of the supernatural, but partially of the natural. We're on this dividing line. Below us are first the higher animals, they were called, like, so that would be like mammals. And then below that, you go down to amphibians, insects, and down to plants and stuff like that. So you're all familiar with this hierarchic understanding of the cosmos. This is, however, what today we would refer to as pseudoscience. Pseudoscience in this case means anything which is put forth as if it had the kind of epistemological certitude as scientific truth does, when in fact it does not. There are two major counterfactual errors built into this pseudoscientific origin myth of ours. It is dualistic and it is hierarchic. It's dualistic in that it divides the cosmos into two separate realms, the natural and the supernatural. It is hierarchic in that the imagined supernatural realm, the divine or spiritual, is considered superior to the natural, the realm of the material, the worldly, the lowly, and morally speaking, the realm of sin. Did I do it wrong again? There we go. That worked. This mythology serves as justification for the doctrine of original sin, with which we're all familiar. Humans are what is that? Here, human beings are, we straddle this dual line. We're partly divine and supernatural, but yet also partly in the lowly natural realm. But this is a stain on us. We're inherently sinful and in need of repair straight off the assembly line because we are partially natural. We have this, we're not like entirely in that realm. But this is the prototype, the archetypical original manufactured need. It is the need for redemption, for salvation built right into the system, right into our fundamental self-conception. This is also the model for planned obsolescence. We humans are so inherently flawed, so inherently sinful, that we will always be returning again and again, perpetually in need of God's forgiveness. Seems to be. And then you go there. So without indoctrination into this particular mythological interpretation of religious dualism and the attendant cynical beliefs, this need for absolution might well never arise in the first place. And it was this which was the fundamental insight which struck me one day, which started me off penning this particular chapter, that at the core of Christianity's success is the very same tactic of lies and coercion, which drives me nuts every day in our capitalist system, which offends me as it seeks to delude, disempower, and gaslight all of us, with its emphasis upon autonomy squelching practices, the manufacture of need and the planning of obsolescence. Yeah, thank you. So, a couple examples of Christian pseudoscience, which still dominate in the world today. Christianity teaches that we are immortal souls, temporarily housed in mortal bodies. When we're conceived, an eternal soul allegedly embodies itself within otherwise lifeless matter. Elan vital, or the vital life force of an allegedly spiritual kind, inhabits otherwise lifeless matter, dead stuff. Human nature is that we are spirits temporarily housing matter. This is, again, pseudoscience. It's not science, it's not fact or truth, and yet people believe this mythical account wholeheartedly today, and not merely the Christian devout, despite the complete and total absence of any viable evidence to support this kind of belief. So this ensoulment is one example of Christian pseudoscience. Here is another one. This is an amazing photograph that we got straight from heaven. Belief in the afterlife. You can see that when we die, we come before supernatural bewinged Jesus clones with identical choices in uber tidy hairstyles in order to face eternal adjudication in a disturbingly binary system. You're either good or you're bad, period. Now I ask you to reflect, how many people do you know who fit entirely into this limited schema, into one category or the other? I've heard that even Hitler loved his dogs. So it's an entirely ludicrous oversimplification of human psychology, human ethics, and morality. But there you have it. When we die, our souls leave the natural realm and enter into this superior spiritual realm to be judged by God. Fear of divine judgment, another entirely fictional bit of pseudoscience, keeps us coming back again and again for forgiveness, redemption, salvation. So, bringing the two together once again, coercing through fear and other means, it didn't do it. Boom. Capitalism effectively convinces us that we need that shiny new automobile, that expensive cosmetic surgery, more new shoes, a gun to be safe, another gun to add to our collection. Christianity creates a sense of fundamental lacking too, manufacturing a need in order to sell us a product, redemption, salvation, an alleged solution to a problem which never really existed in the first place. So I proposed earlier that Christianity was guilty of this self-same, highly problematic reversal of values at depth as capitalism. According to Christianity's misanthropic doctrine, the natural human being is not considered to be intrinsically valuable. It is our alleged eternal souls which are valuable. The natural human being is composed, as we are, of cells, neurons, skin, blood, nerves, all that stuff is merely instrumentally valuable, as it's merely the vehicle or vessel which temporarily houses our immortal soul. This is an inevitable consequence of Christian doctrine, of Christian metaphysics, and of the way that Christianity understands human being, human existence. So here I've just brought two sample illustrations. This one represents obviously the Inquisitions, right? And this one represents the Crusades. These are two massive historical phenomena in which huge numbers of human beings suffered and died as a result of Christianity's inherent intolerance of religious diversity, Christianity and Islam in this case, and its dualistic hierarchic metaphysics, as mentioned. So, Christianity served as an early, highly successful model of manufactured need and planned obsolescence, rooted in the central doctrine of original sin and the high bar which guarantees our perpetual return. It also represents an early model of coercing the young, as well as the un- and under-informed, coercing through fear, again, the social normalization of coercion itself, which stands in contrast to the cultivation of educated, well-informed, and autonomous human beings. Another manifestation of reversal of basic core human values. What is this high bar which guarantees our perpetual return? The 7 deadly or cardinal sins represent a perfect example of Christianity's excessively cynical take on human nature, one which depicts ordinary human traits as inherently evil. But at their core, each of these traits is really an essential, important human characteristic, a definitive quality of the animal Homo sapiens. Only in extreme or antisocial application or expression are these traits problematic. Expressed in moderated pro-social manner, each of these is inextricably interwoven with important, entirely natural and definitive characteristics, often beneficial characteristics of the Homo sapiens. So I'm choosing lust as an example to illustrate, to make the argument. What is that? Is lust really a sin? Should the happy, passionate newlyweds pictured here feel shame, guilt, or remorse? What about the hormone-soaked teenager? Should he be taught guilt or shame for thinking about sex or for masturbating? Threatened with eternal damnation? The answer is, of course, no. In fact, such a denial of our basic nature is itself a kind of sin, famously causing repression, shame, self-loathing, and a host of other psychologically and socially dysfunctional consequences. The idea is not to repress, to feel shame, but instead to learn how to handle these natural traits in a mature, responsible manner. Lust, expressed or experienced in a moderated, responsible, pro-social manner, is a good and beautiful part of what being human is all about. Human being is rendered impoverished by its absence. Many of the highest heights of human creativity and artistic expression, in some measures, we owe to animals, specifically the Homo sapiens animal, in rut. Without lust, there would be no Romeo and Juliet, very little of Shakespeare whatsoever, for that matter. We would lose many of the greatest works of art, music, of song and dance, the theater, literature, the Odyssey, the Rembrandt, Picasso, no Van Gogh, no Elvis either way. There would be no Hollywood. There would be no Bollywood. We'd have no John, Paul, George, or Ringo, no I Want to Hold Your Hand. And most certainly, if we could not have lust, we could not have Prince. This misanthropic view of human nature, high bar, creates a perpetual dependence upon God's worldly institution, the church, for salvation, for restitution, for forgiveness. But it's a solution to a problem which never really existed in the first place until the church manufactured it. So essentially, it's a lie. Both Christianity and capitalism lie. They lie a lot. They rely upon fiction and ignorance to very significant and very similar extents. Looking at Christianity, it's easy to recognize all of the little falsehoods and fictions. You see one right here. He's walking on water. The virgin birth, changing water into wine, burning bushes, parting the Red Sea. The emphasis upon, medical miracles I've always found amusing and interesting. I mean, he's a carpenter, but really, I think he should have been a doctor. After all, he wasn't known for wandering Galilee and performing miraculous repair work on tables and chairs. Where are the famed armoires with the little JC signatures? No? Okay. Anyway, my concern is more with the big, impactful lies, like original sin, for example. Another similarly significant religious fiction, that human beings need God to be good. So this moves us to the next one. I have been arguing against pseudoscience, fiction, mythology, but there's a different question, and it's a specifically pragmatic question. Does it work? So all of Christianity, religion could be a pack of lies and yet still theoretically help us out, right? This is an argument that people make. Is this the case? So in 2019, Pew Research asked the question, and this is the question that you see the answers to here. Do we need belief in God in order to be moral and have good values? So what I've been talking about is whether, it doesn't matter whether God exists or not. The point now is mere belief sufficient to keep us in line, so to speak. If you look at this, the blue represents the nones, or we who believe it is not necessary, atheists and non-believers. The green represents believers, people who think it is necessary. for us to have belief in God in order to be moral and have good values. You can see that there are significant regional differences. Okay, so for example, up here, you can see Greece, Germany, there's a lot of Europe. Oh, I can use the cursor. Does that work? So there's Europe here. You got places with as high as Sweden, which is 90% people believe it is not necessary. On the other hand, oh, wait, that didn't work. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw that startled child at you. We have places like Indonesia, the Philippines, Tunisia, Kenya, Nigeria, sub-Saharan Africa. So a lot of places where Muslim and Christian belief is really strong. The United States is around 50-50 at this point, as is the world average, which is sort of around 50-50, but I'll say a little bit more about the US in a little bit. Worldwide, most people do not believe the religious fiction. Reason trumps faith in this example, but only by the slimmest of margins. The argument against it, I start with by pointing out that there are thriving nations: Canada, Sweden, Spain, France, the UK, Denmark, Czech Republic, New Zealand, all of which have majority non-religious populations, yet are not overtly the worse off for it, morally or otherwise. These are just some examples, okay? Places that demonstrate that we do not need God in order to be good. Secondarily, I will present this little argument from analogy, and that's why we have this poor suffering child here. The Bible has long been the go-to child-rearing manual for millions, teaching us all that to spare the rod is to spoil the child. But modern science informs us that corporal punishment does more harm than good. The abused are far more likely to themselves grow up to become abusers, perpetuating significant mental health disorders, psychological, familial, and societal dysfunction, multi-generational dysfunction, which self-perpetuates and carries on over and over into society and into the future. For the individual, this diagram is from the work of psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg, 100 years after Darwin in 1958, the year I was born. Looking at the moral animal Homo sapiens from a more naturalistic scientific point of view, Kohlberg recognized the importance of moral development in human beings, that we develop the capacity for moral agency. We grow and mature as moral reasoners, beginning in very early infancy, continuing throughout childhood and beyond. Religions like Christianity actually serve to hinder this process, this educational psychological process, to thwart and impede our development as moral reasoners, as moral thinkers. Christian morality actually tends to fix us towards the very bottom, where you can see, if you can see, there it says here, reward and punishment, moral reasoning in the pre-conventional stage. So we're fixed towards the very bottom of Kohlberg's particular model. And of course, Kohlberg is not authoritative, but he represents a good example of this kind of understanding. So down here with the punishment and reward, you can see that's the infamous carrot of heaven versus stick of hell model, so central to Christian morality and so familiar to all of us. So this emphasis upon obedience, upon command and obedient response perpetuates a kind of immaturity, and uninformed and underinformed persons, be they in the marketplace or in the congregation, make the best kind in this upside down moral universe. Christianity and capitalism both thrive upon having a populace which is underdeveloped psychologically, which is docile and compliant. Along with this, naturally, most importantly, comes significant disempowerment. Reason and knowledge, when and where they do blossom, represent threats to both Christianity and to capitalism alike. So my argument is that our concern should be with the cultivation and development of mature moral agency, a process which ideally takes place throughout our childhood and subsequent developmental decades as we mature into adulthood within an educated secular social context. Consider an individual human being, someone who is experiencing remorse over some specific behavior. There's a distinct psychological process, wholly and entirely secular, which begins with acknowledging negative feelings such as genuine remorse, guilt, or shame regarding a specific behavior. Now imagine that he is to recognize and identify the wrongdoing. Imagine that he develops their capacity to place a constructive focus upon the true nature of this particular wrong, considering why it was wrong, why she did it, how it impacted others, friends, family, coworkers. Now, the next step, imagine that these are followed by a genuine, sincere effort to repair, to heal the relationship in question, to genuinely change the behavior that's problematic, to amend rather than merely apologize. This entirely secular account points toward a learning experience, which ideally culminates in a very real sense of absolution, a psychosocial restitution, a sense of forgiveness, which bears fruit far sweeter than any which the abstract absolution of a religious authority could ever hope to convey. This secular model, emphasizing moral and psychological development, and the rewards of genuine, socially integrated forgiveness offer us a far superior approach in every respect. Due to an over-reliance upon indoctrination and authoritarian commands, the devout are less likely to have cultivated the capacity for moral agency and moral reasoning, which all mentally healthy Homo sapiens are capable of, and which is ultimately requisite for a psychologically mature human populace. Psychologically, socially, and morally, the pious tend to remain children in a very real and serious sense, on average. So that is the argument I wanted to present. In addition to those examples, like those countries, we've got an argument which is meant to argue that the individual is better off without. On the collective or group level, the community level, an honest appraisal of the historic record informs us that Christianity generally serves to thwart movements for social justice in spite of their vociferous contentions to the contrary. Taking a look at a significant contemporary example, sort of an obvious one to all of us now and here today, American churches today wave the rainbow flag, many do, to express solidarity with LGBTQ persons within the community, proclaiming that all are welcome, they say. The truth is that Christianity is a very conservative phenomenon, emphasizing tradition, idealizing the past. Far from aligning with the avant-garde in movements for social justice, the pious tend instead to more often ally with conservative voices and the status quo. How quickly we forget. I'm sure some of you remember now. New York's Stonewall riots of 1969 were origin of a genuine revolution in what eventually came to be known as the issue of LGBTQ rights. But early Christian involvement took a different form of significant virulent opposition. No doubt, some of you remember how Christian opposition to the earlier LGBTQ movements was famously championed by such folks as Anita Bryant here, along with Jerry Falwell in the upper left of this Rally for Decency poster here. He was the founder of the infamous moral majority, which we critics of religion were fond of pointing out was in fact neither moral nor majority. How do we make it go, go, go? Go, go, go. There we go. Both Christianity and capitalism thrive when they have a market or congregation which consists largely of uninformed, underinformed, or manipulable consumers and believers. They emphasize fiction, falsehood, and abundant straight-up lies. One such fiction is the widely believed claim that we need God in order to be good, or belief in. On the contrary, the Christian religion generally serves to retard the moral development of human beings, both individually and collectively. So, we are not good because of religion. We are actually good in spite of religion. Further insight can be gleaned from a quick look at the 10 Commandments. These are problematic in both form and content. In terms of form, they represent an emphasis upon mere obedience to commands, as we were talking about. It's Kohlberg's lower rung of moral development, making them complicit in the arrested development of your average American. This is how we become obedient sheep. It ties in directly with the wider cognitive and social stagnation, such as the 1,000 years of Catholic indoctrination, which we call the Dark Ages, to choose one fairly glaring example, or if you prefer, today's science deniers represent a common iteration or manifestation of the same phenomenon. But 10 Commandments are problematic, not just in form, in content as well. They conflate the moral with the merely religious. Take a look at these four. These are the first four. That's 40% of your divine commandments right there. There's not a moral claim in the bunch. These are all entirely religious in their nature. So there's a problem with that content. Plus, many of us have long observed some glaring omissions as well, including some things which are famously tolerated, if not downright encouraged throughout the Bible, such as rape and slavery, to name two of the more obvious examples. I think this third one would make a good addition as well. There's a fundamental disrespect for human autonomy at the core of both Christianity and capitalism. This represents an unhealthy misanthropy, a problematic cynicism, which is not only dehumanizing, but importantly, disempowering as well. So again, both emphasize obedience to command, which works best in a populace of uninformed or underinformed persons, comfortable with being passive and dependent, all of which results in a significantly disempowered, manipulable populace, be it congregation or be it marketplace. This is one of the more popular images of Jesus Christ, a notably Caucasian iteration of the face of Christianity. Christ represents a very austere character, emphasizing simplicity, abstention, self-negation, self-sacrifice, and one might even say poverty as an ideal. But the truth of the matter is that behind the scenes, Christianity and capitalism both emphasize significant concern with the almighty dollar. Despite allegedly idealizing the abstemious, the modest, the simple, and the temperate life, Americans, 70% of whom claim to be followers of this Christ ideal, include over it's like 700 million, no, 200 million millionaires, I think. Oh, there it is. There's the number. 20 million millionaires and approximately 700 billionaires. While the Catholic Church itself is currently estimated to be the third largest owner of real estate in the entire world. So, but morally problematic behavior is not problematic at all to the church. It keeps us coming back again and again. Remember, Christians are not perfect, just forgiven. The emphasis is upon redemption after the fact, on God's perpetually forgiving us for being unremitting sinners, which is an immensely profitable arrangement. Our psychological maturation or moral development, the cultivation of real contextualized virtues, living a Christ-like abstemious lifestyle, not so much. The church benefits, the church thrives when we keep on sinning, we keep coming back again and again, when we go out and sin some more. A glaring example of both Christian hypocrisy and the latent materialism hiding behind the mask, the indulgences were institutionalized by the Catholic Church between 1095 and 1567. So that's like 500 years during which the indulgences were legalized. This is exactly as bad as it sounds. Literally, the legalized sanctioned buying of redemption. Briberies existed before, bribery existed after, and will continue on in millions of different forms. But the indulgences were legitimized payola for divine salvation. So if you sinned, there was no need for remorse, nor moral growth, nor any kind of personal development. You simply pay off the relevant religious authorities, and your record is cleared with the Lord. Go out and sin some more. This is not different from how things are. It's just not as blatant now. So here is another picture of Jesus overturning the tables of the moneylenders. Your average Christian of today is far more like the moneylender than this revolutionary violently overturning the tables of coin. This extreme gap between the face of Christianity and the reality, between the idealized mask on the one hand and the hypocritical, duplicitous truth on the other, in the hearts and the minds of the faithful, is alive and well. Nowhere is this more flagrant and despicable than in the newly minted megachurches, the modern televangelists, and the contemporary doctrine of the prosperity gospel. According to preachers like Joel Osteen, God wants us to be rich and to help make our preacher rich in the process. Joel Osteen's net worth personally is currently estimated to be around $50 million. This one is Pastor Rick Warren, leader of the Saddleback Church, which is currently one of America's largest. He's also the author of that best-selling book, Purpose Driven Life, which some of you have no doubt heard of. These extremely wealthy Christians enjoy the same vast estates as the most successful of the modern capitalists. The mansions, the limousines, the personal jets, the expensive lawyers on retainer, always ready to safeguard their abundant wealth and squeaky clean public reputations. This new breed of mass marketing missionaries reveals starkly that modern Christianity is not above the flagrant greed and self-seeking more commonly associated with the unapologetic materialism of the broker and the banker. These Christians are in fact the very epitome and embodiment of what Jesus Christ allegedly opposed. And it's not just an American phenomenon, the prosperity gospel. Cash Luna is a church based in Guatemala, which is one of the poorest nations in the Western Hemisphere. This one is Alf Lukua, based in South Africa, and he has a personal estimated worth around $1 billion. That's billion with a B. He may, in fact, be the wealthiest of them all, some calculate. So here, of course, the commonalities between Christianity and capitalism are obvious, but there is a very real sense in which these Christians are, in fact, more immoral than your average capitalist multimillionaire. Parading as they do under saintly guise, these supposedly devout practitioners of Christ's teachings represent a particularly wicked form of hypocrisy and duplicity. Looking back, we can see that none of this, the excessive acquisitiveness, the lavish lifestyles, the criminal abuses of power and authority, as with the child molestation cases, none of this stuff is new. The witch burning, for example, was fueled by some not very Christ-like self-involvement and sinfully egregious, excessive antisocial greed. Carl Sagan described this in his excellent 1995 work, The Demon-Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark. So definitely a go-to read. So to put it in his own words, the quote, greed of the inquisitors who routinely I can't do a Carl Sagan voice impression. The greed of the inquisitors who routinely confiscated for their own benefit the property of the accused quickly became an expense account scam. All costs of investigation, trial, and execution were borne by the accused or her relatives, down to per diems for the private detectives hired to spy on her, wine for her guards, banquets for her judges, the travel expenses of a messenger sent to fetch a more experienced torturer from another city, and the faggots, tar, and hangman's rope. There was a bonus to the members of her tribunal for each witch burned, and the convicted witch's remaining property, if any, was divided between church and state. Witch finders were employed, receiving a handsome bounty for each girl or woman they turned over for execution. And quote, so what Sagan helps us to see is that witch hunting was more about money than is generally recognized. And in fact, Christianity itself is more about money than people generally recognize. So another summary, Christianity and Christians are rife with selfish materialism, have been and continue to be. Why are we not clicking again? Over here? Here we go. Unlike capitalism, though, it suggests a kind of duplicity or hypocrisy, which makes it even worse. What does the future hold? As I see it, neither capitalism nor Christianity serve humanity as a source for a positive, viable human self-conception, looking forward long-term into the future. A peaceful human civilization living in a sustainable, interdependent manner right here, right now, within our real world earthly biosphere. On the one hand, Christianity cares about our future, which is great, but unfortunately, it's not the real future, not our natural future here on earth, but a supernatural, entirely fictional future with spirits and souls, heaven and hell. Capitalism, on the other hand, cares not a whit about humanity's real long-term survival. Unlike Christianity, capitalism is in fact very much in touch with reality, with the natural. Unfortunately, however, it is a callous, indifferent, short-sighted, and morally bereft awareness. Christianity sees the natural realm as the inferior, something from which we should be working or praying for our inevitable escape. Hitchens refers to its eschatological nature. Capitalism is very much in touch with reality, but unfortunately, it is largely as a resource to be mercilessly exploited for profit and gain, with callous disregard for real-world consequences and our collective natural future. The one treats our beautiful little unique world as a resource to be exploited. The other as a temporary, inferior place from which we should all be working and praying for our eventual, inevitable escape. Neither serves us as a proper foundation for the cultivation of an ethos of sustainability. So, my upcoming work, the working title, Rise of the Nuns, the Importance of Science and Freedom from Religion, is all about this stuff. It's all about the progress which is happening as a dire result, as a direct result of humanity's growing secularism. Sorry about that. Since the end of the Dark Ages, we've undergone significant increases in reason, science, secularism, humanism, 500 years of relative enlightenment. Within the last 2 to 3 centuries in particular, science, reason, and this general enlightenment have all been on the increase, resulting in some very real, very holistic progress for all of humanity. This progress is a direct result of our slight shift away from religious indoctrination, ever so slightly, towards increased secular education. Unfortunately, in spite of the influence of champions and heroes like those pictured here, religion's influence is still dominant and highly problematic. Rise of the Nuns explores the dynamic tension between scientific and religious knowledge, this notion of progress, what causes it, and what hinders it. The Abrahamic religions of Islam and Christianity continue to be an albatross around the neck of humanity, an anchor chaining us to the highly problematic traditions of the past. As such, the first step which we need to take is to normalize and embrace atheism. Simply put, this means the rejection of false and highly problematic beliefs such as Christianity and capitalism. The subsequent embrace of science, reason, secular thought, and education inevitably lead to the embrace of what we today call humanism. We Homo sapiens are the quintessential learning animal. More so than any other species of evolved organism to date, our beliefs and behaviors are determined by more nurture than nature, more education and experience than hardwired instinct. This adaptability, this malleability is one of those good news, bad news things. It's bad news because we can be indoctrinated, brainwashed, manipulated, programmed, shaped, and led as sheep. But it's also good news because we can change. We can be better, and we can do better. Homo sapiens is not bad by nature. We're bad by nurture. We are largely what we are raised to be. Here is but one element, it's sort of an example, but it's an element in the radical changes which have characterized the last few hundred years in human history. Within a period of merely 100 to 200 years during the 19th century, the animal Homo sapiens went from 90% illiterate to 90% literate. So if you look at the blue, that's literacy, and the whatever color this is illiterate. From 1800 to 2000, right? Continuing on to 2016, you can see this like 90%, from 90% illiterate to 90% literate. That's an incredible change. This is an essential element, our shift away from indoctrination increasingly towards education. Christianity and capitalism share an emphasis upon indoctrination, making for congregations and consumers who are more docile and obedient. Education as a distinct alternative tends more towards empowerment and human autonomy, towards both moral and cognitive maturation. So this distinction between indoctrination and education is of the utmost importance. While it is true that a significant number of Americans still believe in religion's fictional account, we are living in revolutionary times and things are definitely changing. So here's some more Pew research. This one spans from 1972 to 2010. The bottom are the nuns, those with no religious affiliation. The middle, steadfast Catholics. The top, Protestant. This was there was an 11% decrease in Protestant Christianity and a similar sized increase in, how is the cat on the deck? Sorry, a similar sized increase in those who answered none when asked as to their religious affiliation. So this is the rise of the nuns, quite literally. Here, later research spanning from the years 2007 to 2021. You can go ahead and take care of that. You can see an extension of the same process. This process continues. Here's Christianity from 78 to 63. And here is no religion from 16 to 29. And the bottom is other religions. This time frame in which we see the popular embrace of atheist works by the likes of Hitchens, Dawkins, Harris, Michael Shermer, Steven Pinker, and others of their ilk. Up to, we can see the number of US adults who identify with Christianity decreases by around 15%, while the rise of the nuns continues unabated from 16 to 29% of American adults, an increase of approximately 13%, which comes to 27 million people, around the same amount of people as the total population of Texas, America's second most populous state. All of this progress is happening within a mere 4-year time period. Look at that. That's just 4 years. So that is some good news indeed. So one last little summation thing emphasizes this new point that neither Christianity nor capitalism serve as good templates, as models or sources for a sustainability ethos going forward. In fact, important modern values such as sustainability and environmentalism actually threaten them. The stress on simplicity and sustainability threatens capitalist economics, whereas the stress on science and secularism threatens Christianity. Last but certainly not least, our shift away from religious indoctrination and increasingly towards secular education is an essential and extremely positive bit of progress for our species. Final look, we can see that progress is in fact a very real thing, a holistic kind of progress for Homo sapiens and human civilization. The rise of the nuns and the growing impact of secularism are clear examples of this progress. As humanity shifts from indoctrination to genuine autonomy respecting, empowering education, considerable progress is being made. Progress away from schizoid dualism and supernaturalism, increasingly towards a unified naturalistic understanding. Progress as we move from the supernatural to the natural, from faith to reason, from ignorance and pseudoscience, increasingly towards enlightenment and real science. From fiction to fact, from religious epistemology and faith towards an increasingly scientific epistemology and knowledge. progress away from religious indoctrination and towards secular education, ultimately away from both Christianity and capitalism, ever forward towards a sane and secular human civilization, thriving sustainably right here, right now, all sharing this remarkable, perfect pale blue dot upon which we have evolved into human being. Amen. Thank you. Thanks to all the members of the Capital District Humanist Society. Thanks to Mr. Fred Levine for inviting me. I'm so glad this is over. I'm a nervous wreck. I hate public speaking, but I thank you all sincerely for giving me this opportunity. I am very grateful, and I hope that there's still time. I haven't talked too long. So what do we do
So
now?
now you.
Now we do questions and answer. First off, I want to thank you for a very interesting presentation. If you could, if you stop,
Yeah,
that would be great for stopping that. Thank you.
got that. Are we good?
There was, we're good. There was a lot of discussion in the chat about capitalism, and some people have different approaches to capitalism than you do.
I'm sure.
Frank Robinson was concerned that capitalism disregards the cynicism about capitalism disregards the very great extent to which business is geared towards producing things that people want indeed and need, which has resulted in monumental improvement in the quality of life
Absolutely.
for many people in modern times. Sherry pointed out industrialization did that also, but she feels the values in our West are very materialistic rather than pragmatic. Adam or Tom Wolf, I know I'll get Tom's last name right, so I'm not even going to try. Tom W. pointed out that capitalism and religion both benefit greatly from the flywheel effect, developing a sense of their inevitability. Question for you is, what do you feel are the best ways for humanists to model compelling alternatives to influence behavior and belief?
My first thought is that I'm in agreement with I think it was a guy who said the first one you were talking about. Yeah, that if all this progress that I'm talking about is a lot of it is a result of capitalism. It's like all the changes that Steven Pinker wrote about, and Michael Shermer in his The Moral Arc, which is a good one too. They wrote about all this progress, and that's what I'm talking about. And a lot of it is a result of capitalism. But I don't know that it just acknowledging its shortcomings doesn't mean, I'm saying it needs to go away now. I'm not taking a position on that either way. I'm sort of looking at it and just recognizing, it just hit me that, manufactured need and planned obsolescence, these are not, they're not respectful of human autonomy. They're not ideal, and so for the long term, we're going to want something that works better. And I don't have that. I'm just able to identify these commonalities and these things that don't work, that don't meet our needs. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So back to Tom's question for you. Do you feel that what do you think are the best ways for humanists to model compelling alternatives to Christianity to influence belief and behavior?
You want to jump in? I don't know. I think just trying to get the message out that we cannot believe in God and still be good. To normalize atheism, and indeed to an emphasis on secular education and as opposed to religious indoctrination, I think is the answer to a lot of our problems. I think that's why the rise of the nuns is happening, because of basically our university system and the fact that people are literate and more well-read than we used to be, and that changes everything.
I know this is not outside your talk, but Andy asked, given the vile traits of capitalism, what is your alternative? And if you don't have one, that's fine by me.
I don't have one.
Okay.
Hey, Don,
Uh,
Don, if I could interject, please. If you
Yes.
read on about the evils of capitalism, surely you must have some thoughts on how capitalism could be modified or improved or substituted.
Well, it is, and America has brought in elements of socialism like that are really important and really good. I think, Social Security or other things, so I guess you would say I lean towards the socialist or communist, but I don't think that you can go to a place like that through mere legislation. You have to get to where everybody wants to share more. I don't know. I mean, I believe in education. I believe it'll change people, and I'm not really, I don't have a political answer.
Okay. Michelle Vicks asked, fair trade, is there a happy medium for that? I know a lot of this comments are coming back to capitalism, so if it,
Yeah. See, that's what I'm not going to go there, because that's just not my, I'm not well versed enough to speak on that. I was walking along
Okay.
one day, and it occurred to me that manufactured need, which is a very clear example of something which disrespects human autonomy and our capacities, was identical in the way that it operates in the capitalist system, and in the way that and to me, it was largely a critique of Christianity. And that's where my focus was to say that this notion that people still believe that we need God or belief in God to be good is not only wrong, but it's the opposite. In fact, religion serves to hinder our development, as I argue, both individually and collectively. And that's what I'm about, is individual development, secular education, as opposed to religious indoctrination. And then what that can do for the world, we'll come up with answers if we all do that. If people continue to move in that direction, the answers will come as far as that's concerned, how it's to manifest. That's my thought.
okay. Andy had a question for you. Can Christians modify their beliefs as social mores change?
Can they? Sure. Why not? I know. The biggest problem for me is the supernatural belief, but also the way that religious indoctrination causes people to become indoctrinated, to become sheep, as I argued, and so this disempowerment that comes with that is problematic, and the acquiescence to authority. In Nazi Germany, people are like, Hitler and Himmler suck, but the truth is 95% or more of the people who pushed the buttons and pulled the levers and built the fences and shot the guns and dug the trenches were Christians, devout Christians who went to church and had their Bible, and they went to church every Sunday. And the problem is obedience to authority was so familiar to them, and this is partly why.
Okay. Frank Robinson had another comment about capitalism, that he's a capitalist and has gotten rich by making his customers happy and better off. You think that's true of most businesses. Beth commented that businesses can be done in an ethical and moral manner, but that isn't necessarily the case with all businesses. Frank also had a comment that when you were talking towards the end of your presentation, you were talking about reduced consumption. Frank points out that would relate to reduced unemployment, and which equals mass impoverishment. So
there are enlightened capitalists, and there are also they're on the small scale. I know people that I do business with around here, who I take my car to because they're trustworthy and they do a good job, and they're not out to rip anybody off. And there's even larger companies making moves into this enlightened capitalist direction. But if you need to have an enlightened capitalism, then that means there's something wrong with the original. If you need to add, what's that, an adjective to it, a disclaimer to it, then there's something wrong with it in the first place. If it needs to be enlightened, then it's not enlightened to begin with. Does that make sense? So,
Yes.
yeah.
So Sherry had a question back to what would you replace capitalism with, and what was your religious upbringing? Which is the easier one to answer?
What was the question?
What would you suggest for replacing capitalism,
Oh,
and
that.
what was your religious upbringing?
Oh, that's actually complicated. The first one is easy. I don't know.
Okay.
I think we're working towards that. Even here in America, socialism is so a blend of socialism and capitalism seems to be kind of developing, if you will. I mean, so where it's going to go is where it's going to go, and it'll change. I don't think that the current economic system is sustainable. It seems like it's we all know that there's a lot of problems associated with it, both for people and for the planet. So yeah. And what was the other question? I think
Your religious
about what you think is
personally?
Yeah,
I was
your
brought
religious upbringing.
I was brought up in an atheistic household where it was a little complicated because my mother was a spiritual, not religious person back before that phrase became vastly overused. And my father was an anti-religious Jew, whatever that means. So it was confusing, but then I spent a quarter of a century associated with the 12-step fellowships that started here in America. And that introduced me to Christianity. And I lived that way for a quarter of a century before starting to realize some of the problems associated with it that didn't work for me. And that's my first book, what is it called? Common Sense Recovery Diary. What is it? The subtitle?
Atheist Guide to Alcoholics.
Oh, An Atheist Guide to Alcoholics Anonymous. That was the first one that I wrote. And that was about my experience of trying to navigate the world of recovery without believing in God. Because I was raised an atheist, so I guess it kind of stuck,
Well, the old time religion. Fred had raised his hand for a comment.
Yeah, about capitalism. I don't mean to keep rehashing that, but capitalism basically provides a lot of opportunity, and it's helped fuel growth and creativity. But I agree it has gone awry, and from various readings, it seems to me that I can't remember, it was in the 50s. There was an economist, Milton Friedman, University of Chicago, who was considered a guru, who came out with the concept that the only goal of corporations is to make money. Everything else doesn't count. People don't count, just make money, period. And that became the quote unquote Bible of corporations. And then Reagan deregulated things and jumped on that bandwagon. And that basically opened up floodgates. But before Reagan, corporations were taxed at a much higher rate. It just let capitalism run wild, so to speak. And that's where I think a lot of the problems are. It wasn't bad as a concept when it was regulated.
I know if it's I think my belief is that the best thing right now would be to have capitalism is making everything happen for us economically. It's just it's a remarkably positive way of doing things in some ways, but all the stuff I said and what I've said over the last hour are true and valid concerns.
It just needs to be regulated.
The government, exactly. I think government should serve the purpose of mitigating or countering those tendencies. And not to be too obvious here, but there's one party goes one way, another party goes the other way. If you want to be you want to have a government that is not in the pockets of these corporations, that is acting independently in order to genuinely safeguard our rights and the needs of the individual, American or person. So yeah, I guess I just outed myself as a Democrat, didn't I?
Okay. Thank you. There's a question from Eugene, which goes right to the heart of your presentation. Did Christianity and capitalism just independently develop these common characteristics, or is there some specific historical evidence that capitalism learned them from religion?
That's great. I had trouble getting the Free Inquiry to publish this essay at first, and it was because Tom Flynn, bless his heart, who passed away about a year ago or so, wanted me to address that question. I was like, what's the real core connection here? Are you saying? I'm just thinking that capitalism modeled itself. It learned a lot of this from, as I said in the beginning, from the milieu in which it developed. And it was so in a lot of ways, Christianity was the original big business, and capitalism learned a lot of these things, not intentionally so much. It wasn't designed as, it just, it picked up what worked and it followed it. So, and I'm not, to clear, I'm not anti-capitalist. I think what informed consumers and social safety nets, an emphasis on sustainability and environmentalism and education, with these things, like as Fred was saying, maybe we need to have the government play this balancing act, because those things are important. Having informed consumers is really important, and that's part of the problem I see with Christianity as well, is that same emphasis upon anti-knowledge. It's right there in the Bible, and it's, there's a strong anti-education theme or current that runs throughout Christianity, and the less you know, the better you can be manipulated, the better you can be manipulated, whether it's to put $1 in the hat or whether it's to buy a new car after 2 years because, hey, your car doesn't look brand new and you need another one, yeah. So I'm about what Fred was saying, which is the government to counterbalance it, not to work hand in hand with it. And I'm about education, empowerment and education, which I think will get us where we need to go, whatever its title may be, whatever the economic system or ideology is, it doesn't matter so much. If just the process of secular education and respectful, autonomous freedom and education.
Okay, very good. Appreciate that. Tom W. And I'm afraid to try to pronounce your last name. So Tom W.
Why don't you pronounce it for us, Tom?
Sure. The name is Tom Watusik. It's a silent J. That'll make it simpler for you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Anyway, Tom said, it seems to me that the wider application of critical thinking is a key to challenging and mitigating the ill effects of any societal trend, including religion and capitalism.
Yes. Yeah, I'd go with that. I like it.
Tom, you're spot on.
What you say?
Pardon?
I just said what you say.
He's practicing.
Yes, well, okay. What a guy.
Spot.
So Don P., one of the other Dons, said, things don't have to be one or the other. Capitalism can be and has been modified to improve its effects on society.
Yeah.
This has happened through regulation, laws, and social movements. There's nothing wrong with continuing to improve it and modify it.
Absolutely. No argument there.
Okay, Beth said very spot on ideas, brings up complicated questions that are hard to discuss in the chat. As Bill Moyer said, embrace complexity. Tom had another comment here. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Tom has another comment. An interesting recent trend that you may be familiar with is with the B Corporation in a sort of market regulated or perhaps self-regulated form. From their website, B Lab is the nonprofit network transforming the global economy to benefit the people, to benefit all people, communities, and the planet. It's gives a website in the chat, www.bcorporation.net/ENWD US. I'm not familiar with that. Tom, you want to share something about that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not necessarily advocating or promoting. So I just found it quite interesting that I found that I was doing business with a couple of companies that called themselves B corporations, and I dug into it a little bit further. Their website will tell you what that's all about. And I found it interesting that it's, I think probably a combination of just self-awareness on the part of the people who run these businesses, and some market forces that are, pushing them in these directions. And I think it's just something to consider and look at. I think it's a growing trend.
Okay. Jeff had a question. How do you keep capitalism out of government? That seems to be a conflict of interest.
How do you keep capitalism out of government? Good question.
Yeah.
See, I'm
would-
sorry. My primary focus has been on Christianity. I'm not
Okay.
really big on political science, and it doesn't interest me as much. But it just struck me as fascinating how similar these patterns were, and my critique is mostly with Christianity. Capitalism is something that is huge and loosely defined, and it can be disastrously bad, and it can be wonderfully good, depending upon a lot of variables. But I do think one of the variables is the kind of empowerment and awareness that come with a good, solid secular education, however it's achieved, and often in conflict with what religious indoctrination and its anti-knowledge stance. So I'm much more about seeing people educated and free, not bound cognitively or otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a comment from Michelle Vick that kind of summarizes some of the things we said earlier. The only way for capitalism to work is to let the customer be in the driver's seat. If only we could do that with Christianity. And Jim pointed out that it seems to me that the real point of Adam's presentation is that humans are remarkably susceptible to manipulation, and that being made aware of our vulnerability can put us in better controls of our lives.
Exactly. And I think that's a big part of what I'm about, which is just like, I don't really have here's the next economic system which we should, practice. It's more like, let's just be aware of what's real and what's really happening. And the things that I believe that I wrote, in this 1 hour presentation, I think they're all real, factual phenomena. They're real things. And it's like, if that's happening, so where do we go from here? But the knowledge is the starting place.
Yeah. Sherry had a question she wanted to answer. Sherry?
Yeah, are you still taping video?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll be invisible. I had a whole lot of feedback. One is I agree with a lot of what you say, and I don't agree with a lot of what you say, which is exactly what this group does oftentimes. But I make a distinction between capitalism and materialism. Capitalism, when I was tutoring citizenship classes, basically our financial construct is a free market society, which is capitalism, which is what America's finances are based on. There can be abuses, there can be benefits. As far as comparing it, when I was in the 60s, I was a utopian, I was an optimist, and then I kind of, through the decades, learned that to criticize things without being able to replace them with something else is kind of a very difficult slide to be, on. I want to point out that there are, communism is not an alternative as far as look at the abuse, look at how, absolute power corrupts absolutely through history. If you look at socialism, yes, we have embodied some of those things, but we are still basically a free market society. And I want to make a big distinction between capitalism and materialism. You know, you have Italy where it's Catholic, you know, you have Christianity, you know, that there's no other influence really. And yet you don't have that same materialistic hunger that Americans have. So I'm just kind of going to slice that piece of cake a little bit thinner and say that I don't see them as being the same. I also have a real hard time when, you know, we either say good things or bad things in total about a group. And I would not say that all religions are the path to destruction and evil. I think that we can have some good things. And I am an atheist. I'm a, you know, proud flag-carrying atheist. But I do see that sometimes religion can do good things. You know, there's charitable works. There was Mother Teresa, you know, Salvation Army, aside from wanting to convert you, does a lot of rehab and, you know, service-oriented things for humanity. So, you know, that's some of my input there. And I thank you for your talk.
Thank you.
If there's anything that you wanted to address that I kind of brought up, feel free.
I don't want to, just my voice to be the dominant voice. I mean,
You're the speaker.
Okay.
I think if there was anything, there was one thing I wanted to comment on, and there's a work by Hitchens on Mother Teresa. Is that her name? Sister Teresa, Mother Teresa. And it was a very interesting read. I don't know if you've ever checked it out, but the history of Christianity is significantly dominated by the fact that they get to write the narrative. Christians have written the narrative of history to make Christianity much more benign and pleasant than it really is. It has a lot more negative consequences than people realize because they're the winners, and so they write the books. I would recommend Nixie, Catherine Nixie's The Darkening Age, as well as anything by Hitchens, that troublemaker. But we know of, just to give one example, we know of the saints as people who are virtuous. We think of them as, you know, ideally virtues, exemplars of moral good. The reality of history is that you get canonized for converting people. That's what you get made a saint for, if you spread the message well. And that's what made people saints back when that meant chopping off people's heads. So that's not in the books, and everybody will, in our contemporary world, people will talk about saints as if they were unanimously morally good exemplars. The reality is that they did whatever needed to be done to convert people. And so there's a lot of lies and stuff to get through, and that's part of my problem with that. But it's a shared trait with capitalism, you know, that they don't want you fully informed because they can't be led around by the nose as well.
Mhm.
Did you know?
Well, with capitalism, I mean, our government is basically getting bought off, and we have, you know, people who are lobbying and sort of making, I guess what I'm saying is that capitalism is not quite as pure as it had been once intended to be.
Yeah, well, and I think, you know, the big corporations are a 20th century thing to some extent. It wasn't like that originally a long time ago. Capitalism out of government, no campaign contributions. I like that.
And if somebody
So-
here got rich off capitalism, I'd like them to take me out for lunch.
Yeah, I'm hoping my book sells by the thousands, tens of thousands, and I'll give some money to good corporations like organizations like you guys.
Great. So Don P had a comment that he thinks your use, Adam, he thinks your use of the big business model of the late Renaissance church as a basis for the Enlightenment philosophers, Adam, Smith, Hume, and others, and the development of capitalism one of the best arguments for the relationship that he's establishing. So you can go back to, well, Tom Flim's not there anymore, so you can't go back and raise that argument, tweak the article to include that.
Okay. Thank you.
There was another comment here about, Jeff thought your point of comparing the manipulation of modern capitalism, that you think your point is that you're comparing the manipulation of modern capitalism and organizing religion, and not really on whether capitalism as a whole is good or bad.
Can you run that by me again?
Okay, Jeff said, I think Adam's point is in comparing the manipulation of modern capitalism and organized religion. They both manipulate.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not, but your point, you weren't trying to say whether capitalism as a whole is good or bad.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, you know, it's one of the, you can't look at work like my work, which I've done, you know, my book and all that. There's a big emphasis upon human progress and how in the last 500 years, things have gotten way, way better. And again, you know, these are written about in various books and with which I'm sure many of you are familiar. And if not for capitalism, the capitalist economic system, none of that would be happening. I mean, none of it, but the vast majority of it. It's all interconnected, and this progress that's happening is largely as a result of capitalism. But I think that it's not viable long term in the current form. You know, the way things are being done in America now with the large businesses and in corporate, the government partially in corporate control, it's not exactly a long-term plan. You know, we need something that's we can do that's more sustainable. And I think it would start with empowering human beings and educating human beings to the max. So we're not just a bunch of sheep following orders.
Right.
Right. So people talked earlier, critical thinking. Tom just had a comment that our current government doesn't really support the American educational system, but certainly I recognize not the way it used to.
Mhm.
That all leads to us we'll believe what we're told.
Well, and this group here, I would be willing to bet anything, rates differently than the average American slice. The average slice of Americana, they I hate to sound conspiratorial, but they want us to be dumb. They want, you know, people who will follow orders, consume products, not question, not argue, and do what we're told.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more profitable to have us,
Go
you
buy
know,
the-
available as cogs in the wheel, one way or the other.
We need to promote that.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see, Beth said Patagonia is a good example of a B Corp. Seems to be a ethically run corporation due to the philosophy of its
corporation.
founder.
Mm.
Okay. I don't see any other hands raised. I think we've addressed most of the comments. Adam, I do want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
I see a few thumbs up, but I do appreciate you coming to talk to us. Even
Sorry,
though
I was
from the
such a nervous wreck.
Oh, don't be
you did-
nervous, just fake it.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity. I really do.